Joe is not playing with a full deck. He made that comment. I said, whoa, I saw it because I was on something. I had a television. I saw his comment. Joe Biden is not playing with a full deck. This is not somebody you could have as your president. But if he got the nomination, I'd be thrilled.
That was an extremely warm president of the United States, fully capitalizing on a gaffe by Democratic frontrunner Joe Biden. What Trump says was Biden speaking last night at a forum hosted by Asian and Latinx activists.
We have this notion that somehow if you're poor, you cannot do it. Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids, wealthy kids, black kids, Asian kids.
He quickly corrects himself, but yes, cringe-inducing for sure. The clip quickly made its way around the internet with this caption from a Trump campaign Twitter account, quote, "Yikes, have fun mitigating that one." Of course, the person who wrote that tweet works for the Trump campaign, doing rapid response. And this small moment is a perfect microcosm of the sheer surreal asymmetry of running against one Donald Trump. If the Biden gaffe is a gaffe, how should we describe the president of the United States getting the name of a city where a mass shooting just happened wrong, referring to Dayton as Toledo, even though he's reading off prompter? Or how about the president releasing a triumphant propaganda video of himself smiling and glad-handing and soaking up adulation in the hospitals, treating the wounded of 2 gun massacres? Or him tweeting completely nonsensically about the Fed, his continued downright bizarre words of near-romantic infatuation with the North Korea dictator, not to mention the completely mud-brain nonsense he unspools in nearly every occasion on any and every topic. The problem, though, is that most of this behavior is so commonplace, so expected, it barely registers. When it comes time for the general election, you can imagine how strong the temptation will be to put the Democratic nominee, whoever it is, on a roughly similar footing to Trump. In fact, we lived through this before with the emails. Here with me now, Charlie Pierce, a writer-at-large for Esquire, and Natalia Salgado, senior political strategist at the Center for Popular Democracy. You know, Charlie, to me, there's actually a fundamental problem here, which is the old news cliche that dog bites man is not news, man bites dog is news, right? So, you know, Donald Trump said today, like, he talked once again about he got a beautiful letter from Kim Jong-un. And that's just, it's nuts. It's bizarre the way he talks about him. If Cory Booker said that or Kamala Harris said that, it would probably be news. But in some strict sense with the president, it's not news precisely because he does it so often.
Well, we've seen this before, Chris. We saw this with President Reagan, especially in his second term. We saw this with George W. Bush in the debates with Al Gore. You had the right word for it before. It's asymmetry. It's Democratic sins are amplified by a right-wing media apparatus that has not only its own faithful convinced, but also has the elite political media buffaloed.
There's also the fact, Natalia, which I think is so interesting here, and this I think is a very deep issue, and it goes back to 2016. The Trump campaign and Trump have no ideology, really. They have sort of dispositions. There's no view of the world they're really fighting for, aside from a few core instincts like bigotry, for instance. And so they will attack from the left and the right simultaneously. So this is the Trump campaign being like, oh, your candidate said something racist or racially insensitive, but that's ridiculous coming from them.
It's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, I think that the fear-mongering that has come out of the White House in the last couple months has really sort of risen the temperature around this country. I mean, just looking at the response of what happened in Times Square earlier this week, the country is terrified. They are terrified because the highest office of the land is out here inciting violence against people of color. So for him to come out and just try to use this moment to point at someone else as being the problem is absolutely ridiculous.
Well, and there's also, I mean, Charlie, there's also, to Natalia's point about pointing someone else being the problem, like, there is this weird rubber and glue thing that, you know, I'm not the puppet, you're the puppet, he says to Hillary Clinton, while Russia is, like, actively working in a criminal and systemic fashion to get him elected. That, like, this is a guy who literally can't get through a paragraph without saying something completely head-scratching. He wants to go, he's going to go around talking about someone else is losing it.
Right, and you know, and Joe, to be completely honest, Joe Biden has had these problems before. He's
Right.
had this specific problem before, which was back in 2008, where he talked about Barack Obama being clean and articulate or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I don't think this is a function of age. I think it's a function of Joe Biden being a terrible presidential candidate. But in any event, he will pay he will pay in certain circles, and some of them not entirely of the conservative sort, a higher price for saying what he said than Donald Trump will pay for literally calling for extra legal solutions, shall we say.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Natalia.
So I have to completely agree with Charlie. I think that, let's stop talking about his mental state. Right? Let's just get off of that, because if we really want to talk about mental state, let's talk about the commander in chief, right? And there's been enough that's been written and said about that. I think that what we need to talk about is the problem with Joe as a candidate and the problem with Joe addressing issues around race. I think this gap sort of encapsulates where he's at. He doesn't get the nuances, he doesn't get the complexities, and it's starting to show time and time again.
That's true, although the other response to that is that, and I've seen people write this analysis, and I think there's something compelling about it, Charlie, is that there's a kind of resilience that Joe Biden has on this stuff that maybe another candidate doesn't, right? In the same way that Trump kept saying things during the Republican primary and people kept being like, all right, he's done. And it was like, no, he's not done. Joe Biden has said things or been attacked on things where there's been a lot of the commentariat saying like, oh, well, he's toast. And the polls show his position essentially unchanged. So maybe there's a sort of similar dynamic happening with Biden because of the goodwill he's built up.
Well, I think that's the difference, what you just said. He has built up goodwill. Donald Trump doesn't know how to do that. Donald
Right.
Trump couldn't build up goodwill, in a Mongol horde, let alone normal human beings. If you surrounded him with Genghis Khan's army, he couldn't be the person with goodwill. But you may be right. I mean, certainly Biden's lead in the polls has been durable. It's outlasted all of these so far. Again, it's August of 2015, and who knows what will happen. But I mean, I would be wary if I were the people running his campaign of giving him unguarded moments, because he's proven he doesn't know what to do with
Natalia.
Yeah, I have some theories around that. I think name recognition is a big deal. Let's not underestimate that.
Yep.
And I think that when folks are scared, they want to be able to point or to be with someone that they know, right?
Totally.
And for
Yes.
better or for worse, folks know Uncle Joe. And they
Yep.
know his position with Barack Obama. They know how much he was esteemed by an esteemed president. And when you're scared and you're worried about your future and you're worried about your kids' future, you're going to go with the safe choice.
That's as good.
Yeah, and
that's
I
as
think
good
that-
a
I think
bumper
that-
sticker articulation of the Biden phenomenon as I've heard, Charlie.
Yeah, I think there's also a great desire out there in the world to get things back to normal.
Yes.
Let's all get back to normal. Let's take a knee. Let's take a couple of plays off, and then we'll start the actual work of becoming a sane country again once we all catch our breath. And I don't think that's something you can minimize when taking Biden's candidacy into account. He
No, I think it's
does
a big-
represent a return to normalcy, as they used to say around the Harding administration.
All right, Charlie Pierce and Natalia Salgado, thank you both. Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.